What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got the top 10 essential S songs from Magnum, brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Joseph. Always enjoy Joseph's stuff. Don't know a lot of Magnum, just know the stuff that Joseph has brought me on live streams, mainly of live streams all the time around here. Just give us a follow on Twitch below, and all the info will be there. So Joseph always gives these fantastic write-ups. I think he's outdone himself this time in the way that he sequenced this one. So all this research is Joseph's, not mine. I want to give credit where credit is due. He says this is presented basically in chronological order. So let's dive into the research. So Joseph says, for a band celebrating their 50th anniversary next year, they've had relatively few members in their ranks. The drum stool will be in the source of the majority of the lineup changes, but regardless of the other players, superb as they've all been, it's a combination of Tony Clarkin, guitar songwriting from 1992 production, and Bob Catley vocals that is their beating heart and make them what they are. But what is that? As almost sole writer of all Magnum's material, Tony Clarkin has always maintained a light and shade approach to keep things varied and interesting. So lyrically recurrent themes are anti-war statements and other philosophical, political, and personal musings, but with ventures into the realm of pure fantasy, especially very early on, and even the occasional relatively straightforward love song for some light relief. Well, musically, Wiki calls them simply hard rock, while AllMusic's biography extends that moniker to melodic hard rock, with the band being tangentially tied to the new wave of British heavy metal movement of the late 70s and early 80s. But they've also been variously labeled as prog, pomp, and AOR over the years. The lack of easy pigeonholing may be one of the reasons they never quite broke through as a frontline act, which I would agree. But on the other side of the coin is almost certainly what has guaranteed them a devotedly loyal following that has seen them score UK chart albums in 6 consecutive decades, which is absolutely amazing, including 2 sustained bursts of regular top 40 activity, the 7 studio albums from 1982's Chase the Dragon through 1992's Sleepwalking, and their 4 most recent efforts, beginning with 2014's Escape from the Shadow Garden through to last year's The Serpent Rings. Top 40 singles did eventually also come, but restricted to the brief 88 to 90 period that remains their commercial peak. As noted above, Bob Catley on vocals, Tony Clarkin guitars, backing vocals are constant, with Clarkin also writing all the material. Rare exceptions will be noted. He says, I'll note personal comings and goings and other potted history bits and pieces as we go along for context. And that's exactly how this list, I've already organized this list, all of his research. It was all done for me. I just organized it in a way that's easy to sit here and react to it. And it's fantastic because we're going to have a song, we're going to react to it, and we're going to have a little band history that leads up to the next song and album. It's just so well done. Don't get big-headed about this, Joseph, but it's so well done. So before we start, the music will not be in the video itself. It'll get black, but click on the Vimeo link below so you can experience this thing right along with me. Let's go to the first song. You see it below. We have Stormbringer. It was actually a demo recording way back in 1974. Joseph says the band had come together in 1972 with Clarkin and Catley joined by Kex Gorin on drums. What a name, man. Who would remain on board until late 1983, and Dave Morgan on bass. This is one of 4 songs the band demoed with local Birmingham producer Jake Commander. What a name, also, in 1974. So we're starting right at the beginning. Lyrically, this is pure fantasy, directly inspired by Michael Moorcock's character Elric and his titular sword. While the quality of the recording is light years away from high fidelity, I imagine a demo back then, you can already hear the energy in the band and Bob's confidence in the studio from the onset. All right, let's check this one out. As Joseph said, you can definitely hear Bob's confidence, man. And the chorus is surprisingly catchy. I said during the reaction, it's got like a little bit of funk in there. The bass work was really good by Dave Morgan on there. The instrumentation was fantastic. Had a little Jethro Tull feel to it at times. Yeah, a really good song for being a demo. A really good song. The lyrics don't need broken down. It's just a fantasy world. But the Stormbringer, the way he said it's very catchy, man. It sticks in your head. And they use the trick of repeating that chorus several times. And in the way he sings it, it definitely makes it stick, man. And now Joseph's going to tell us what goes on after this. 1975 saw their official recording debut with a one-off single for CBS. Bizarrely, not a Tony Clarkin original, but a cover of Sweets for My Sweet. Tony did nab the B-side, even more bizarrely with Dave Morgan rather than Catley on lead vocals. Unsurprisingly, this recording hasn't made my list. Morgan was gone by the time the 1974 demo finally made its way to the ears of David Arden of Jet Records, to whom they were duly signed in 1976, retaining Commander as producer of their first proper recording. By this time, Wally Lowe was on bass. He would last right through to the band's breakup in 1995, and they also had Richard Bailey on keyboards and flute. Jet started as they intended to go on with the band, however badly, with the finished album left on the shelf for a full 2 years before finally being released in 1978, at which point they had built up enough of a live following to see it make a modest entry in the UK charts at number 58. Now we're up to number 2 on this top 10. We're going from 1 to 10, not 10 to 1. So Cold the Night from Magnum 2 in 1979. For their sophomore effort, Jet recruited former 10 years after bassist Leo Lyons as producer. While the resulting album would surprisingly fail to make the charts, Lyons was retained for the 1980 live release Marauder, which had this muscular piece as one of 6 Magnum 2 tracks in its 8-track running order. 2 more on the accompanying, wait for it, double EP. Redundant or not, which, yes, that is, it proved the commercial breakthrough with the album hitting the top 40 and the EP making the top 50 in the singles charts. So Cold the Night. Got to get those keys in there at the very end and bring it down. I really like songs. And, I think you're either going to really like this music or it's not for you at all. I get it. I really like this kind of music, and I think Joseph knows that by now. Some Marillion, some Magnum. I like the grain. We had over a minute of build to this song instrumentally, a little harder, and then we dialed it back and Bob comes in on the vocals, and then we build it again, and then we come out with just the keys and Bob's voice. So I don't know what the song's about, man. I mean, I'm reading the lyrics and it doesn't really matter, right? It's more about the sonic experience. But I hear the sound, the earth does tremble at my feet, skies explode at last we meet, anger flows so sad, oh, and the wings that flew me here were glad, like before I've never said, or like before I've never had, but there's always tomorrow, strange dreams of sorrow. And then he rides the storm of tearful faces wrapped in pain. Here I am I to blame? Now some more band history. Richard Bailey left the fold at this point, but it wasn't long before they had a permanent replacement in the form of the 3rd longest serving Magnum member ever, keyboardist Mark Stanway. They soon set to work on their 3rd studio album, this time with American Jeff Glicksman, best known for helming most of the big Kansas albums in the producer's chair. The resulting album was arguably the first Magnum masterpiece, but for a second time, Jet sat on a Magnum album for almost 2 years before finally releasing it. I can't imagine being an artist, putting my blood, sweat, and tears into something, and then they just sit on it for 2 years, and you got no control over that. It's got to be beyond frustrating, which this moves us into the 3rd track. You see it below, Soldier of the Line from the Chase the Dragon album in 1982. Joseph says, whatever Jet's reasons for the delay, fans felt it was worth the wait, and it shot into the UK top 20 with this moody, atmospheric opener setting the bar for the album, as well as the many anti-war songs to follow. The album also sported the first of many fantasy, and he says, and fantastic covers from artist Rodney Matthews, which I looked at all their covers. They're quite intricate. Great as those covers are, they played a part in confusing people about Magnum's lyrical bent. Robin Smith, writing in Record World, wasn't impressed. His 1-star review of an album with 0 fantasy lyrics, Joseph says, decreeing that the problem with Magnum is they've got no pride or class, and it's once again the same old stuff about Dungeons, Dragons, and our place in the universe. Joseph says, sure, whatever. Shows you how lazy Record World and Robin Smith were in reviewing this. But we're not lazy here at Reaction to the Classics. We're going to read the lyrics, we're going to listen to the song, and we're going to comment. Get some full-on harmonies on this one. Soldier of the Line. Again, a 1-minute build into it. It's basically talking about the soldier on the line, right? He's polishing the gun in the first verse. He's polishing the steel, and now he's having to go out and fight, right? And like, what is that in your eyes? Don't cry. You've got to go do your thing. And as it unfolds, it's a very cinematic song. Hey, Joseph's an actor. I can see why he likes it, right? As it unfolds, he ends up dying, right? There's some pretty difficult lines here. Soldier of the Line, it isn't fair. You're bleeding deep inside. Nobody cares. Your flag and lance stand proud, splintered and red. No movement in the fields. The crows will be fed. Soldier of the Line, you've come to the end. You'll never get to see your mother again. Some unfamiliar place you're going to stay. An unremembered name. An unforgettable day. You're in a murderous playground. Work games on a castle wall. You're in a murderous playground. Crossed out if you dare to fall. It is the age-old story of military aggression, right? guys sitting somewhere else make these decisions, and people who don't have the money or don't have the resource, we go fight for them. And then we die somewhere and no one remembers it except for those who knew us and what was it all for. And I mean, this does a very good job of encompassing that. Really enjoyed that, not only musically, but also lyrically. Now back to our story. One final album for Jet, The 11th Hour, followed in 1983, self-produced by Tony as a label-imposed cost-cutting exercise. But to cut a long story ridiculously short, by 1986, they had the full classic lineup in place with the arrival of Mickey Barker on drums and were freshly signed to Polydor Records. Their first Polydor album, the Roger Taylor-produced Vigilante, yielded 3 minor single chart entries, which paved the way for the bigger breakthrough that was set to come as Days of No Trust, the first single from their second Polydor release, Wings of Heaven, saw them earn their first top 40 single. Now for these next 2 songs, we're on to number 4 in the list, in the chronological list. These next 2 are only going to be on YouTube because they were not on US Spotify. We got at number 4, Start Talking Love from the Wings of Heaven album in 1988. Tony recounted the origin of this unusually, by Magnum standards, standard pop rock love song in the tour program. It arose from a point when I was feeling a bit lonely for the women back home. The first part was written at home, and then when we went to Holland to record Wings of Heaven, Wally Bob and I went into a spare studio and we messed about with the basic concept of the number. Anyway, Albert Bolkholt, co-producer, heard it and thought it sounded really good, but I didn't have any words for it. So I went back to the Amityville Horror House, the band's unflattering nickname for their accommodation in Holland, Joseph says. And I was just sitting there with a lit candle and a glass of wine, and I felt a bit lonely, slightly sorry for myself. And the verse came to me as being about separation from someone you really love. Second single from the album, It Better Days of Trust, peak of number 32, to net them their first top 30 single and first Top of the Pops appearance to boot, whereas erroneously introduced as Sweet Talking Love, subsequently peaking at number 22, the best they could ever manage. Likewise, the album peaked at a career best of number 5. Can you imagine that? I bet they were horrified. You finally make it to Top of the Pops and they announce you incorrectly. That would be frustrating. All right, let's check it out. Start Talking Love. I'm going to tell you, this came out in 1988, so I was either 16 or 17, depending on what time of the year this came out. 16 or 17-year-old me would have loved this song. 50-year-old me loves this song. This is a great song. It's by far my favorite song on here. I don't know what that says about me since it's the pop rock stuff, but it's so anthemic, and that's what I already enjoy about Magnum. You get these anthemic choruses coming in, but he's just telling her, I'm never going to give you up. I never want to make you cry. Never going to give you up. That's not Rick Astley here, guys. Don't get carried away here. It's just another lonely night. I'm missing you again. Nothing ever turns out right. So when's it going to end? You know that I'd run through the night to be with you. Talk about love. It's a walk from the dark to the light to be with you. Start talking love. Talk about love. So whoever Bob sang this to, they would have really dug this one. Like I said, so far my favorite. Although I've liked every selection so far. Now Joseph says success had its own costs, and Polydor decided it was time for Magnum to crack the American market. As part of this plan, they decreed that for the first time, Tony should work with outside writers, including proven hitmakers Russ Ballard and Jim Vallance. While one of the Russ Ballard co-writes, Rockin' Chair, did wind up being another UK top 40 single, it has to be said that the strongest songs, certainly the least generic ones on the album, were the ones solely written by Clarkin. Produced in LA by Keith Olsen, the Goodnight LA album made the UK top 10, but as for cracking the US market, well, in the end, it wasn't even released there. This whole debacle led to the band paying Polydor to release them from their contract and heading to independent label Music for Nations for their next release, which of course takes us to number 5. Also, I'll remind you, another YouTube track. That's why you don't see it on the Spotify bar below. We got Sleepwalking, title track to their 1992 album. The point at which Tony chose to start self-producing, lessons learned from Keith Olsen, meant the Goodnight LA experience wasn't a completely wasted experience. And the band sound notably free and relaxed on this album, the first in years to be free of label interference. The title track even boasting an uncharacteristic acoustic guitar-led instrumental section amidst its more driving verses and choruses. All right, man, I'm intrigued. Lyrically, it's said to be an autobiographical song of Tony's in which he reflects on several things he has witnessed in his life. For example, the end of the Cold War, while Lennon's assassination is one of the clear references contained within. Wow. Your write-up intrigued me. Let's check it out, Sleepwalking. So Sleepwalking, apparently autobiographical according to Joseph. So starts out lost in the shadows, rain clouds all day. There's a ghost in the mirror. Well, I'm gone, but I'm not too far away, so he's losing himself, right? I must be sleepwalking, can't believe that sweet talking. No magic red shoes under my bed, so little Wizard of Oz throw out there, and then we just get that I must be sleepwalking, can't believe that sweet talking, I must be sleepwalking, can't believe that sleep talking. We get that 3 times to end it, but it's in the song 4 times, which once again is a very smart songwriting technique, right? It's very anthemic, really good guitar work on here. This is more of what I think of Magnum as sounding like after hearing some of these songs so far and some stuff I've heard in live streams and enjoyed it. Now we're going to have some real history here. Changing music tastes and the lesser promotional abilities of a smaller label saw a downturn in commercial fortunes. Sleepwalking made the top 30, but the first single disappeared without a trace, and the planned second single was canceled as a result. 2 more albums followed, but by late 1995, an exhausted Tony Clarkin decided to call it a day, and a successful farewell tour supposedly closed the door on Magnum for all time. Intending to switching to writing for other people, he asked Bob to sing on some demos. These resulted in a label offer, and suddenly they found themselves as a new band, Hard Rain. A second, more band-oriented album followed in 1999, but Bob had also launched a solo career by this point, and being less keen on the Hard Rain style, quit the band. Initially, Tony intended to continue Hard Rain with backing vocalist Sue McCloskey, whom he also began to write with. The first time he'd had a writing partner by choice rather than label demand. But this came to nothing, and it was then he decided to reform Magnum, if anybody was interested. Bob jumped at the chance, and Mark Stanway also agreed to return. Lowe and Barker were unavailable/uninterested, so a new rhythm section was found with Al Barrow, who'd also been in Hard Rain on bass, and Thunder's Harry James joining on drums. A lineup that, thanks to a new deal with German label SPV, and barring a few years with Harry returning to a reformed Thunder in the late 2000s, would last for 15 years and 8 albums. Now we're back onto Spotify for one song. There's one more YouTube song. I think I told you earlier there was 2. There's 3. We got Still from the Breath of Life album in 2002. One of the songs Tony had written with Sue McCloskey in the dying days of Hard Rain. This doesn't sound like anything that band had produced, and was incredibly commercial sounding by Magnum standards too. Mark's keyboards drive the song, and is one of the more straightforward yet irresistibly catchy and anthemic tunes the band ever released. Joseph, you know I'm going to like this then. The only downside is that for the whole album, Harry wasn't yet in place on drums. So Tony used programmed drums and samples. Oh, which, let's be honest, are pretty bloody awful. You take me up, and then you take me back down. But let's see. Still, wow. Really like that one as well. Just when I think it can't get worse, and I'm sure it's never going to work, you tell me everything's all right, and I know you'll take away the hurt. No words of wisdom, no stories end. I don't understand, you see, but I can't help myself. It's something I can't fight. That's the way it's going to be. Still hanging on. Wait a lifetime for you. So you get the idea of what the song is about. Joseph's write-up, as it has been so far, was absolutely perfect. Anthemic. I've really, really enjoyed that one. Now, as we progress the story of Magnum, as the reunion progressed, their faltering commercial fortunes very gradually began to reverse, with each album performing a little better than the preceding one. With Tony now writing and producing every album, some have complained that the individual albums aren't as distinctly different from each other as in the past. But while that's a hard point to argue, most fans would also agree that the quality of the material makes up for that. Beginning with 2007's Princess Alice and the Broken Arrow, we're in an ever-growing second golden era for the band, which is in part why 40% of this list comes from their most recent decade of output, which is quite impressive. So we go back over to YouTube for the 7th selection, Spin Like a Wheel from The Visitation in 2011. Released about 6 months after I landed in the UK, Joseph says, I used the accompanying tour for this album as an excuse to visit Liverpool and do my obligatory Beatles tourism, of course, for the first time for what would be my first full Magnum gig, having previously caught their 45-minute set at London's High Voltage Festival the summer before, on the same stage headlined by Marillion later that night. Yes, I was in heaven. That was my first thought for you, Joseph. Joseph loves Marillion. Got a bunch of Marillion stuff up on the channel brought by Joseph. This musically epic track details the aftermath of a relationship that was clearly toxic from the beginning. I know little of Tony's personal life, so I'm not sure if this song came from personal experience, but for his sake, I hope not. It was a highlight of that show. The album continued that slow upward trajectory for the band, hitting number 55, and making the top 20 in Germany, their best showing in almost 2 decades. Spin Like a Wheel. It's so highly impressive that all the way in 2011 they're putting out something like this. The drumming was absolutely fantastic. The lyrics is an anthem. I mean, 7 minutes, 21 seconds of just catchiness. Fantastic, man. And, you know, it just kind of tells you the story of spin like a wheel, I fall down on my knees. Don't you know how bad that feels? It hurts when you're in need. Never forget, never forget. I don't know where to go and I could run through the rain, but there's one thing I know. Never forget, never forget. Now tell me if you can just how it all began. Unfamiliar you came and there was no guarantee. Couldn't look past your face into your eyes. I got hurt by the pain, or you wouldn't disagree. In a fatal embrace I would despise. And now he's talking about the dreams. And he finishes with, now I know it was only a dream. No, it never could last. It ran by so fast. Poor Bob, man. Joseph says 2012's On the 13th Day reached number 43, and 2014's Escape from the Shadow Garden finally restored them to the top 40 at number 38 for the first time in 22 years. That's amazing. Those tours took me to Bristol, where they had a full house despite competition from Motorhead playing the same night. I met several Motorhead fans later that night who'd had a disappointing gig and realized they'd made the wrong choice. And the tour also took him to Manchester. But redundancy and my subsequent move back into the creative industries and the financial uncertainties that go hand in hand with that have meant it's been London-only gigs for me since then. Fun while it lasted, though, I would imagine it was. Now we go to number 8 on this list, Sacred Blood, Divine Lies, from the Sacred Blood, Divine Lies album in 2016. Bob described the title track of another new long-term best, number 31 chart-performing album, as basically about people who put themselves up as a godlike personage or thing. Not really as an actual god, but saying, follow me, people. They tell you this is all this rubbish and people fall for it. They do it in a godly manner, hence they're divinely lying to you. And that's basically what the song is about. It's nothing to do with religion or anything like that. It's about people who use other people's shortcomings and take advantage of you. Well, I'll tell you what, I can only speak for in America. That's definitely what a bunch of religious leaders do in this country. And I'm a Christian, but that ain't Christianity. So I'm looking forward to this one. Sacred Blood, Divine Lies. I actually viewed this from the aspect of being a false religious prophet, right? Because that's just how I viewed it. It's a great song. I think the guitar work I mentioned during the reaction might be the best guitar work so far on this list, and that's saying something. But the chorus, you know, there's nothing near you will pacify, no holy prophet to crucify, a silent shadow of burning flame, the empty picture that you became, oh sacred blood, divine lies. You never thought that you'd be misled, because none of us ever do, right? But then it came as a big surprise, and on this journey you fear to tread, there's nothing near you will pacify, no holy prophet to crucify, a silent shadow, a burning flame, the empty picture that you became when we've been duped, when we've been lied to. So great vocal performance from Bob. All these years later, I mean, this is 2016, man, being on the brink. Guitar work top-notch, drumming top-notch. Now on to our history of the band. After an extensive European and UK tour in April and May, the band planned a short run of Christmas dates later that year. 2 shows into those dates, this most stable of Magnum lineup suddenly fell apart, with Mark Stanway abruptly quitting. The tour continued with Rick Benton brought in last-minute replacement. He remains with the band to this day. The full story is still out of the public domain, but suffice to say Tony and Bob haven't had a pleasant word to say about Stanway ever since, sadly. Mark himself surprised many by subsequently forming Kingdom of Madness, a band playing many Magnum classics of the 78 to 95 era that have been out of the band's set list for years. Among the other members are Mickey Barker and even Mark's Magnum predecessor, Richard Bailey. So despite Tony's protest, they really are a great deal more than a tribute act. Not long after this, Harry also left on a much more amicable terms, as it was becoming increasingly difficult to juggle Magnum with Thunder, who had reformed yet again and were increasingly busy and successful with several top 10 albums in recent years, to be replaced by Lee Morris. It was this lineup who would put together Magnum album number 20. Now we got Show Me Your Hands, Lost on the Road to Eternity album from 2018. The new members seemed to give the band a whole new lease of life, and that combined with BBC radio play for the first time in decades for the single Without Love saw the album reach a peak of number 15. Not only theirs, as by now is usual, best in decades, but their third best ever. A showcase for new boy Rick Benton, this track is Tony's tribute to the ever-loyal Magnum fan base. Show Me Your Hands. A really well-done song. It seems like on these later songs that are more recent, they really pushed in the instrumentation into a certain style of who they are. Tony's Guitar work on here is fantastic. Bob still sounds great. The harmonies. It's kind of like two songs in one, sort of, I guess, because the chorus, show me your hands, let's get it on tonight, show me your hands, come to shine bright. I mean, he's talking to a girl, I guess, there, but at the start when I was younger and people told me you're just a number, that's all you'll be. Now I see it sort of stuck in my head. It fooled me. Hard to know everything that they had said. A zero. Now I can see right through the pain. No need to explain. It's in that chorus. And it's kind of one of those things, man. If people tell you you're something enough, then you start to believe that. It starts to form your self-concept, man. I've seen it happen many, many times. I've seen it happen to many people. And I might have got told a few of those things by my father when I was young. And it can shape you, man. You either push back against it or you just start to believe it because you're told it so much. But a fun track there for sure. Now we're to the final track. Or are we? But first, we have one final lineup change then occurred with Al Barrow's departure, again an amicable one. He still looks after the band's visuals and social media outlets due to his permanent move to the U.S. Oddly enough, he was replaced on bass by Dennis Ward, an actual American. And now we get to the last track, or is it? We got the Serpent Rings title track from their 2020 album. A certain wee pandemic that you may have heard of has prevented this lineup from touring. But before that came along to ruin everybody's lives, this kicked off Magnum's 6th decade in existence with yet another top 40 album. The return to a lack of mainstream radio airplay, this time seeing a lower position than its predecessor for the first time in recent memory, but it still reached a respectable number 36. The title track bringing us full circle as one of the few post-70s Magnum tracks to go full fantasy on us in a track Tony describes as having started as a science fiction story before turning into an eerie fairy tale. Let's listen to this and stick around because you may have a surprise on the way. The Serpent Rings, I think taken from the last few tracks, the same theme of the fact that the instrumentation is grand. This one's really grand. It really pushes into that fantasy theme. We've got a bunch of strings. We got all kinds of stuff just coming in here. The thunder, the rain. You can just hear it all. I think the chorus kind of lets you know it's in that fantasy world. So beware if you follow that creed. The crowd all sing of flaming horses that run with great speed on silent wings. Don't take it in, don't take it in, don't take it in. I know the hangman can't wait to begin. Great line right there. I think something's got to really be pointed out here, right? This album came out last year at the time of this film, in 2020. The first track we heard on this list was from 1974. You just got to let that sink in a little bit, right? That's 46 years of singing in the way that Bob sings. It's amazing that his voice still sounds this good. And the guitar work, is once again top notch on this one. It's almost like Tony gets better and better, at least on these tracks. Not that he wasn't good on the first ones. But we still have a little bit more to Joseph's list. He says this doesn't end the story or the list, spoiler alert, as the delayed Serpent Rings tour has been rescheduled at least 3 times now, if my math is any good, to next year. Hey man, there's so many concerts that have been rescheduled, by which time it won't even be the Serpent Rings tour anymore, as album 22 is due out before then. With Bob and Tony now approaching their 70s, the question of how long the band can continue is ever present. But they are contracted by SPV for at least one more studio album after that, and then time will tell. For now, let's head back in time to when their new great keyboardist was Mr. Mark Stanway. We're going to go for a little encore action. You see it below, Sacred Hour from the Chase the Dragon album in 1982. When compiling these career-spanning lists, I try to avoid having more than one tune per album, but Chase the Dragon boasts 3 essential S tunes, so while I can't make room for the Spirit as well, it would be criminal not to include this classic from the early days. Often used over the years as an encore and perform the same function here to close out our very own. There we have it, our encore, Sacred Hour. It did have the longest, I think by my calculations, intro at 1 minute 37 seconds of anything on this list. I did enjoy this one. I don't know what he's really talking about. I can hear them calling, hear the crowd applauding. It's if it's real, I like the feeling. If I'm wrong, who am I deceiving? So, is he in this one Sacred Hour? Is it little shout out to the fans? There's some other stuff in there that, a little fantasy driven, maybe relationship driven, but enjoy that one, and definitely a fitting encore. And I can see why it's an encore because it's kind of a soaring track. So now we'll get to my final thoughts and, of course, my favorite tracks. I think as they went on, there was not a fall off, which is kind of crazy from these last several songs, minus the last one because that was from 1982. Piano seemed to be more in there a little bit. Instrumentation seemed to even be more on point. It kind of sounded like I thought it would going in, and that's good for me because I actually like this kind of stuff quite a bit. So my honorable mentions are So Cold the Night, all the way back in 1979, and then Sacred Blood, Divine Lies, all the way up in 2016. That tells you a lot. My faves are going to be predictable as you watch this list. Start Talking Love from 1988, Still from 2002, and Spin Like a Wheel. The longest track on here at 7 minutes 21 seconds also comes in there as a fave. So guys, appreciate you joining me. Joseph, thanks for bringing this. And not only that, just a fantastic write-up and history lesson, the way you took us chronologically through what happened between the different songs and albums. And man, that was super, super well done. So guys, if you'd like to be a patron and support us anyway, like Joseph does, check out the Patreon link below or the link on the end screen that's about to hit. Until next time, guys, I will see you.